Welcome back to episode 15 of the Snowboard Instructor podcast. This week we have Darren Swift, the first double above knee amputee BASI snowboard instructor. We talk about his experiences being a snowboard athlete, alongside his equipment he uses on a daily basis for shredding. Alongside this, we have a sponsor for this episode. Watch and Ride is an online snowboarding school which focuses on improving your ability no matter what level you are. With loads of quick tutorials and feedback from high-level instructors, you're bound to improve not just your technical ability, but also your knowledge. They also have a fitness program to help maintain your fitness for next season of shredding. As we all know, lockdown has made us a bit lazy. Visit Watch and Ride and use the coupon code Snowboard Instructor Podcast for 25% off your order. We hope you enjoy this episode and have a great day. Yeah, Darren, thanks for joining, man. It's super good to have you on. I remember the last time
Thanks for asking me.
I remember the last time we were together was on Renal's little level 1 in MK, which was like 2 years ago, well, a year and a bit ago, really, November time. God, yeah, it doesn't feel that long, does it? It feels like it was yesterday. I just had the previous episode, which I was speaking with Renal actually, who's going to be on the previous episode, and yeah, we were just kind of reminiscing about that like level 1 week, and just thinking how quick it went, but also like it doesn't feel that long ago, which is absolutely mental. But yeah, man,
I think it's quite hard.
Sorry, carry on.
I think it's quite hard at the moment to try and put that chronologically because of the COVID thing. Everything's so disjointed, and our memories are taking us back to that time. So that shortened that period, back to then. What was it? November 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it seems like yesterday, really, and the week did go quite quick. The week went pretty fast, didn't it? But an enjoyable week.
Yeah. I was just wondering. Well, we'll probably get into it anyway. In terms of how you found that level 1 in a bit more detail. But yeah, let's kind of start off then your history, where you kind of started off with snowboarding, how it came to be. And just tell me, when were you introduced into it?
Okay. Well, I suppose I introduced myself. When I left the army many years ago after being blown up, and most of the listeners probably know that story. But I was blown up in Northern Ireland in 1991. Lost both my legs, 2 fingers, and various other shrapnel injuries around the body. And I'd made a decision in the hospital about 3 weeks after I'd blown up. The doctors reluctantly allowed me to have a bath on my own. At that point, I've been getting bathed by cool thing, but a lazy thing. So I decided I wanted to get some independence and start that route of independence, and ask the doctors if I could have a bath on my own. And so I did, and got out of the bath and turned around, as you imagine, naked in my wheelchair to grab a towel, and there was this full-length mirror in front of me on the back of the door. And I remember sort of being shocked, because this was the first time I'd seen myself after losing my legs. I used to be 6'2", and now I'm this little short person in a wheelchair, and I could see all the scars and the broken tissue and everything, and the stitches, the staples, everything, all the puncture wounds, and most importantly, I could see the space where I didn't have legs anymore. So I just sat there. It must have been 15, 20 minutes. I sat there just looking at myself in the mirror. And I didn't start bawling my eyes out and curling up, screaming and shouting. I just stared. And after about 15 minutes, I kind of came to the realization that I've got one of 2 choices here. I can let these nurses wipe my backside for me for the rest of my life, or I can get on. with the rest of my life. And so that's really what I did. I made that decision there and then to get on with whatever I've got left for however long I've got left. So that's what I did. And I left the army. 18 months later, I left the army and just immediately got out into travel again, really, because that's why I joined the army in the first place, to travel and see the world. So I started doing that, got involved in a few expeditions and stuff. And there was a very good friend of mine that I'd been in the army with. He was also out, and his brother had been a Paralympic sit skier in Lillehammer, believe it or not, all those years ago. I can't remember what year it was now, but in Lillehammer, he was one of the first Paralympic sit skiers. Anyway, he had an old sit ski that he wasn't using anymore, and my mate Dave said, "Do you fancy coming out to Chamonix?" I didn't even know where Chamonix was. Never been on skis. Even all my time in the army, never been on skis, or certainly not a snowboard. And so off we went to Chamonix, and I learned to sit ski. And I did a load of other things and around that time, but I continued to do sit skiing for about 10 years. And then one year I was on my own out in because I was Billy No Mates, and I was on my own out in Sestria in Italy, and some of the listeners might have been there. And I was sat in this cafe mid-afternoon, just finishing that long Italian lunch that we all have.
Yeah.
Right. And I looked up and I saw three guys, probably about your age, Max, and they were coming down this slope on snowboards. And I sat there, and I'd been working my butt off all day, well, for the whole week, on this sit ski, lugging this thing around, trying to get on and off lifts with it. And, I didn't have anyone with me to help out. I was doing it all on my own. And so I was pretty tired, and I'm sitting there, and I'd had, let's face it, a half bottle of wine, nice Italian wine. And I saw these guys coming down, and I thought, that's what I want to do. Why can't I do that? Why can't I snowboard? I want to do that. So I came back from that trip, and a couple of days later, I was in the pub with my mate, Dale Renard, who's a graphic design guy. That's what he does. Very logical thinking guy, quite inventive. And we sat in the pub, and I said, "You know what, mate? I really fancy snowboarding." He went, "You're joking?" I said, "I fancy it, mate. It looks really cool. I want to do that." So we sat there literally with a beer mat and a pen that we borrowed from the bar, and we drew a rudimentary design of a snowboard with a way of attaching me to the snowboard. Now, I won't go into the whole process, to be honest with you, Max, because I'll be here forever, and we just haven't got the time for that. But effectively, I strapped myself to a board. Canoe straps that you might strap on a canoe to the roof rack of a car?
Yeah.
Well, I had 8 of those, and I strapped myself. I made some connections on this old board that someone had given me. A kid's board, I might add. It was an old Nitro 135. Tiny little board, absolutely rockered, massive rocker on it. And had no idea about snowboarding, absolutely no idea at all. So I live in the Lake District, and I took myself on a 4-hour drive down to Milton Keynes. Got to Milton Keynes. Just a little interjection here. Because I was involved in the wind tunnel at Milton Keynes, I'd met a guy who owned the whole thing at the time, P.Y. Jabot.
Oh, yeah.
And he party once, if I ever want to use Milton Keynes, the Snow Dome, for anything, I could come down and use it for free. Just mention his name. So that's exactly what I did. I went down, I blagged the front desk. I said, P.Y. Jabot. I don't think the front desk even knew who P.Y. Jabot was. And I said, he could sell it and use it. And they said, okay, where are you going? So I literally went and strapped myself to this board. I can't remember now. I think I went up I managed to find my way on the Pommer.
Yeah.
Up the slope. I got to the first station, the first level. And as I was approaching it, I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's go to the top. So off I went to the top and stood there, had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and stood up with this board strapped to me, and off I went. and I stayed up for about 3 seconds. And I thought that was a success. I was the only person on the slope, so I didn't have anyone to worry about. I wasn't going to hit anyone. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. So anyway, listen, long story short, I did that for 2 years. What I did, every Tuesday, I drove for 4 hours, did 2 hours on the slope, drove, did some time in the wind tunnel, then drove back to 4 hours. And over that time, I developed from the straps, I'd worked up into pots. I bolted some pots on with shelf brackets. I drilled through the board. I thought that was a good idea at the time. So I had bolts hanging out the bottom of the board and everything. And one day there was a lad there called Kieran Sharp, who was one of the pieces there, and he whilst operating the button one day, he said, "Why don't you try doing this? Why don't you try doing?" He gave me a couple of tips, and they worked. These things that he was telling me to do worked. And I stayed up a bit longer, and I was actually starting to do turns and that. So really, that's how it started out. That's how I got going. I've moved on then to some pretty substantial metal bindings, which we'll come on to later, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely.
But I'll describe them a bit better later. But I've moved on to them, and that whole thing, what I've just described to you, was 16 years ago, nearly 17 years ago now, I think. And really, it's just been onwards and upwards, if you pardon the pun, from there, onwards and downwards. And that's really what I've been doing, just experimenting, trying different things. Again, perhaps we'll come on to it a bit later, but I'm still developing those bindings and getting them safer so I can produce them and allow other people with double above knee amputations to ride as well. So that's how I got into snowboarding. That's my story up to essentially November 2019, when I met you at Renell at the adaptive snowboard course. So that's the history. In the last few years, I don't know, you may be aware, some of the listeners might be aware that I attempted to go for the Paralympics in Seoul and in South Korea, and I did 3 years, 2.5, 3 years of training for that all over the world in competitions. Unfortunately, there is no category for double above knee amputees, and that's quite important. I'll say that again: double above knee amputees. You have to just lump it and like it, really. You join the LL1 group, which is single above knees and double below knees. So I, and other disabilities as well. So I was up against it. I started out at the very bottom. I was lower than whale poo for the first year, and I was getting nowhere. And by the time I finished, I was 11th in the category, which I was really quite pleased with, to be honest with you. However, the British powers that be decided that I wasn't good enough to go to Korea, so I wasn't chosen as part of the team, which is regretful, and I still have a bit of angst about it. Lack of foresight on the part of some of those authorities, perhaps. I don't want to get into all that because it's a messy affair, and I'm quite annoyed and angry towards some people about that. But that's just the way it was. So I kind of resigned myself to not being able to do the Paralympics yet. And as you know, I'm 55 years old now, so I'm not sure I've got the ability to go again. I'd love to, but the cost is enormous, absolutely enormous. I spent a lot of money in that 2.5 years, as some of your listeners will be only too aware, probably. And so my efforts at the moment really are concentrating on getting other people younger than me, other double above knee amputees, to potentially, if they want to, go down that route and perhaps be Paralympic snowboarders.
So may I ask, actually, just to go in a bit more detail on the process over those 2.5 years. So, like, what were the tests you did, and what were like the challenges that you had to overcome when doing the training?
Well, the first thing you do is have to qualify, or classify is the correct term. And so you quite literally, for those that are perhaps unaware, we went to Langer in the November of 2015 or whatever it was, 16. Went to Langer. What am I talking about? Landgraf. Sorry. Langer's a completely different place. Went to Landgraf in Holland, and you spend a couple of days there. There's a competition, but prior to that, you literally go in front of 2 or 3 people, officials, and they measure your stumps and they make sure you're not cheating. Yeah. You've not got more leg than you're saying you have. So you literally have to strip off and they measure your stumps. Anyway, the 2 people that I was in front of, I knew them anyway, and they said, "Okay, Swifty, we're gonna let you go through, but you realise there's no category for you. You're gonna just have to go in LL1." And I said, "Well, if that's all I can do, that's all I can do." So that's what I did. Joined LL1, and they sort of both said, "Well done, fair play to you. Good luck with that, because it's a real challenge." And sure enough, it was. The training itself, the coaches that I worked with were fantastic, and they did, without adapting the training schedule much for me. I just got on with the rest. I was riding with Owen Pick and James Barnes-Miller, and I did the best I could with what I had. Some of the biggest challenges were, as we all know, some of the resorts weren't very accessible, from accommodation through to actually getting on the slopes. But that aside, that was something that was a given. We knew that anyway. The training I did as much as I could with the guys, and kept up with them as best I could. My timings improved over that 2.5 years. My timings on courses improved, but not enough for me to be selected. I had actually qualified with the IPC qualification. I'd done that, but the Brits added took another 3 seconds off basically, and I couldn't make up those 3 seconds, which was really unfortunate. But hey, there you go. That's the way it worked. So it was a challenge. The training was hard. I did enjoy it. I come from a military background, so I enjoyed the hard work. It was very hard work for me. Some parts of it. Just as a little anecdote, we were in Saas-Fee, and we all wore these polar watches, with a strap.
Yeah.
That tell you all your biometrics and all the rest of it. And we finished the day, and as we were coming down in the gondola, I didn't have a clue how to work this watch. I didn't know what to do. So I said to James, "James, what's the score here? What have I got here? Look, what's this telling me?" And he pressed a few buttons. He went, I won't say exactly what he said because you might have some young ears listening. But he said, "Well, that's unbelievable." He said, got the coach over. He said, "Look at this." And I was 467% of the daily percentage I should have got. It was 100. And everyone else is sort of 150, 200. Anyway, the coach looked at it and said, "Right, no weights for you when we get down. no more physical effort for you when you get down." And that was an eye-opener for everyone. And it showed that and this isn't me blowing my trumpet here, guys. I don't mean it in this way. I'm just showing you, trying to give you an idea of the exertion, the amount of energy expended in one simple day of training. We had been up there all day from 8:30 in the morning, and this was now 3:30 or something. And I'd expended that much energy, and I still had the rest of the day to go. We had to do our boards, do our tech, and get ourselves cleaned up. Simple act of getting in the shower and getting out the shower, that's all energy sappy. So that was an eye opener to everyone. I think that was something that was quite important to be acknowledged. That a day on the slope is, for someone with a severe impairment, doubly hard or quadruple hard, as it were. So there's a bit of a waffle there, Max.
That was great. I wanted to kind of hear, because I'm not quite as familiar on how the process works, especially in the Paralympics. So it's definitely an eye opener on how it does work. And yeah, it just goes to show how much, like heart and grit you have to put in just to kind of get to like a certain kind of category. But yeah, that's absolutely.
I would recommend anyone to, if they have that initial feeling that they'd like to go and race and get to that level, in Paralympic or Olympic level, go to it, but ask yourself the question: how much do you really want this? Because you really do. You really need to want it, and you're going to be, if you want to get to the top, then you need to put the effort in, and there's going to be some tough times, some really tough times. And any competition racer will tell you that. In anything, any sport, will tell you you've got to put the time in, and sacrifice quite a lot, financially and otherwise, emotionally as well, if you want to reach the top. So that's not to put anyone off. That's more to prepare people. If you want to do it, just sit and ask yourself that question: how much do I want this?
Yeah, definitely. And it's really kind of being realistic about it, and that. It all comes down to the drive, really, and being able to have that drive for sure. Let's move on to so you've just kind of we'll move on to up to the course itself, the level 1 course that you did in MK. When did you first learn about the adaptive course itself, that like teaching course, and what made you want to become an instructor?
I'd been aware that there were courses available to people, but I to be honest with you, Max, I'd always poo-pooed it because I didn't think that I would be able to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd be accepted onto the course. Unfortunately, through AFPST, Armed Forces Para Snowsport team, Rich Stevenson, one of our bosses, he made some inquiries with BASI to see if it would be possible. And he told me that he was going to do this, and I made it quite clear to him I didn't want anyone to change the course. Don't adapt the course to fit me. I'd rather just slot in, and if I do it, I do it. If I don't, I don't. So that's what Rich did, and the powers that be at BASI decided that this was, something that's worthwhile, and I think it was almost a bit of a guinea pig thing, which I'm quite happy being a guinea pig. They accepted that I had this disability and that they didn't have to change much of the course. And as you know, because we were both on the course together, Brunel treated us all the same. There were some things that were made, not made easier, but Brunel was wonderful in that she was able to adapt the way we did things to accommodate me and allow me perhaps more time or to expend less energy perhaps as well. So, but other than that, we ran the course, as you know, and it ran as any course full of able-bodied people. So that was a really great thing to do, and so that's how I became aware of the course. And it really, for me, because I just finished with the Paralympic thing, I really needed to start looking at how I was going to stay in the sport and what I wanted to do with it. And I really want to, as you do, Max, spread the word and get more and more people involved. And I see absolutely no reason why people with disabilities shouldn't be involved in the sport if they so wish. And so I really wanted to be part of that and allow people to have a go.
Yeah, that course itself was, I think, for everyone, I think it was really inspirational having you on board. Just to kind of really get into the nitty gritty side, and snowboard adaptive especially, and kind of looking at it as a qualification instructing wise is like a really new thing. It's still pretty kind of shiny and brand new. So even having you on board and being able to kind of have her now kind of really kind of figure out what's the best kind of way and how to kind of go about it was really interesting. And yeah, I mean, I was speaking to her now previously, and I think we're all excited to see where it goes in the future and how it's going to grow and how it's going to expand. And we were so kind of happy just seeing like especially you just kind of just driving and having a good laugh as well, which was the best thing about it. And yeah, it was a really good course. I think we all had a great time with it. And yeah, it was good seeing Rich. To be fair, Rich did message me a couple of weeks ago and saying, you should definitely get Swifty on. And I'm like, don't worry, Rich, he's already on my list anyway. So that was really good. But yeah, it was good seeing everyone, and I hope everyone's still doing well anyway, with that for sure.
Yeah. No, it's great, and hats off to BASI.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, carry on. It's all good.
Hats off to BASI and Ronell for taking it on and saying, right, let's do it. Let's do this. You know, and because of that, I you know, and this is trumpet blowing. I know it sounds trumpet blowing, but I'm the first double above knee amputee to be a snowboard instructor. You know, and that's great. That's great for everyone. It's great for Britain. It's great for BASI. It's great for snowboarding. You know, there is someone out there, and it's a mark. It's a stick in the sand, I suppose, isn't it? Let's see where we can go from here. Let's see who else we can bring on board. Yeah. And
kind of going from the qualification yourself, you've got that qualification. Did you do any kind of teaching experience after that? So did you do some teaching out in like Andorra, Austria? Where did you find that kind of qualification helped with?
Well, I it almost immediately came into effect because we went out and we started doing stuff with AFPST, and which was the usual stuff, really. But now I had it wasn't a case of, I've got this qualification, so now I must be talking.
Yeah.
I must be talking sense. It wasn't so much a case of that, but it was my ability then to employ some of the things that Ronell taught us and be a bit more instructor-like in that respect, and I suppose people were able to understand it was coming from a base. It wasn't just Swifty gobbing off. This is where it's come from. So that was good in itself. There was James Sterry was teaching. Had been approached by a guy called Paul Chalice, Paul and Ellie Chalice, and Ellie's a quad amp. She lost both her arms and legs at 18 months old through meningitis, and James had been working with her at, or was going to be working with her at Hemel, at the Snow Centre, and so he asked me to come along and sort of put my 2 pennies worth in, and so that was good. And now I'm legally able to coach and to instruct. Ellie is busy, and I think I probably told you before, Max, she's busy with swimming at the moment, and the GB Paralympic squad will not let her go off and do snowboarding for obvious reasons. They've put a lot of money and funding into her, and they don't want to go breaking something. So not that she's got a hell of a lot to break there, but, you know, they don't want to get it broken. So that's a fair one. But she said to her dad only a few months ago, she said as soon as she's back from the Paralympics, she's going to start snowboarding again. She wants to get onto the snowboard again. So I'm really looking forward to that. And Paul sort of forewarned me that this is going to happen. So I'm looking forward to that and getting Ellie up and running. So, all thumbs up to James and everyone else at DSUK who's done such a great job of getting her there and giving her that initial go. And now, hopefully, maybe myself and James will work together and move Ellie along eventually.
How old's Ellie? How old's Ellie, by the way? Because
she's 16 now, I believe.
Wow,
yeah,
nice.
She's 16.
Yeah,
I met her when she was 16.
I saw those. I saw the videos you showed me when we were at the at that level 1 where she was like on the box and kind of just shredding it down. It was super interesting to see, for sure.
It's interesting with Ellie because I'd said to her prior to her going away with DSUK, I said, Ellie, no jumps, don't stay off the park, don't do nothing like that. You don't need to be doing anything like that. Just stay on the slope and just nice and calm. And then that video came back of her doing a box, and I was like, okay. All the advice went straight out the window. Hey, she can take it. That girl, she is as hard as nails. She really is. She's a lovely young lady, and and she's doing a great job with the swimming, and I know she's going to be a great snowboarder as well. She's really going to rock it. So I'm looking forward to getting back with her on the slopes again and teaching her some stuff. In the meantime, I've got obviously AFPST, which is a mix of all the disabilities, physical and otherwise. And Lee is my main sort of focus, I suppose. Lee is another ex-serviceman and a veteran, a double above knee amputee, and he's been riding now, nearly 3 years, I suppose, 2.5 years. He's been riding and he's doing great. And between us both, we're guinea pigging lots of different ideas about bindings and what have you. He had some carbon fibre bindings made exactly the same as the metal ones you saw me on.
Yeah.
He had some carbon fibre ones made, and we took them to Breckenridge, to the Hartford Ski Spec, which is an awesome trip. And we tried them out there, and there was something about them. They weren't giving you quite the ride that we get off the metal ones, and we couldn't work out why. But that's something we'll work with and keep developing.
I mean, let's move on to the equipment itself then, and kind of go into more detail, because when you came along, you had two sets of bindings. One was just kind of your standard metal bindings that we saw, and then you had your kind of ones with the shock absorbers in to allow you to kind of get that suspension, which was really, really interesting. But yeah, do tell me first off how you kind of course you've kind of came to be with how they were made, but where did you get it manufactured? Those certain sets, and of course the ideas of that.
Okay, well, the metal ones that you'd see me ride, that I normally use, the metal ones are made by a fabrication company which is across the bay from me, up here in the Lake District, and a company called Shemaines have made them for me. They've made a number of sets, and they're brilliant. They're fantastic and they work, but as you rightly said, there's no suspension in them. So Dale and I have been working for essentially the last 16, 17 years on, we always knew that we needed suspension. I have no knees, or double above knees, have no knees by the very definition. So we struggle with absorbing any impact. And you can appreciate that impact comes up through what's left of the femur into the pelvis, which doesn't have suspension, and into the spine, which doesn't have suspension. So ultimately, the impact will manifest itself at the base of the head, the top of the neck, the top of the spine, which is not a good feeling. So we need to do something about that. It's essential that there is some form of shock absorption suspension in the system. So to that end, we've shopped around and we've used a number of different people over the years, but we've kindly offered help from CFMS, Centre for Material Simulation, Modelling Simulation. Sorry, and there's a guy there called Davide, this Italian guy and it's all about the aviation industry. Essentially, they work with the aviation industry, and this is, I should say this up front, this is before COVID. So anyway, these guys were just fantastic. And Dale and I went for a meeting with them, took them the old bindings and showed them, told them what the problem was. They went away and redesigned a pair. And months later, managed to get them 3D printed by Airbus. Airbus were very kindly put themselves forward as the manufacturers, prototypers. So they made this 3D pair for us, and you saw them first at the course with Renell on the adaptive course, and you saw there were certain problems with them. They weren't quite what we were needing, but there was a need for more adaptations or more alterations, tweaks. Anyway, after that course, I went to Breckenridge to the Hartford Ski Spec, and I used them there. And one particular day, I think it was about -21. We went out, and I was on this particular slope, which is one of my favourites, not very forgiving slope, and I broke them. And they broke where we thought they would break, which was thumbs up. We were quite happy that they broke, and it sounds the oddest thing, but we were happy that they broke. It was towards the end of the trip anyway, so it was kind of that run where I wanted to test to destruction. I didn't want to destroy myself, but if they broke, we want them to break now. And sure enough, they did. So they went back, and this is all pre-COVID. They broke. We brought them back, and I rang Davide, and he said, "Yeah, no problem. Send them down. Let's look at it." And they were in the process of doing some assessments, finding out why they broke. We think it was the moisture and the cold together that broke the compound that they're made from, the composite. That's how it got left, because COVID then interrupted everything. The aviation industry, as we all know, has taken an enormous hit, and Airbus have had to slow everything down and ease back from things. And Davide hasn't been allowed to get into his laboratory, his mad scientist laboratory, where he does all this magic. So it's all been on hold, really, which is a real shame, because we really felt we were going somewhere. In the meantime, we have redesigned, or Davide has looked at it, and we've come up with not just where they broke, but there's some other ideas about how we might modify them, make them lighter. They were already lighter than the metal ones, but we needed them even lighter. And they were slightly, although they were a prototype, they were slightly complicated in the setup. It wasn't as easy as you putting your bindings on your board. You had to fiddle around a bit. So we kind of made some drawings and some modifications to that side of the design. We're just waiting for them to be able to get back to work, really, and do some testing of different compounds, some moisture-resistant compounds. We're talking all aircraft materials here, stuff that they make planes from. So that's where we're at with the bindings. COVID has kicked us in the backside, really. I still have my metal bindings. I've got them here on my board, on my Duprat. And I'll if we go back to some riding in the near future, then that's what I'll be using. And it just means, as you know, because you've seen me ride, and some of the listeners may have as well. I ride with a certain amount of caution. I have to be more route selective than you guys, because I haven't got that ability to absorb the impacts. So I'm just back to doing that, really. And Lee will be in the same position. So myself and Lee will get back to doing that at some point in the near future.
Can I ask?
There is, just to finish that little bit, there is a guy in the States, in New Jersey, who I've been in contact with over the last few weeks, a guy called Gil, and he lost his legs in a horrific car accident. He was mown down on the highway whilst changing his tyre. Someone creamed into him, and basically he lost both his legs. And Gil's very young, younger than you, Max. And he was a snowboarder, and he wants to get back to it, and he's hell bent on it. Usually, if someone's 5 months into their amputations, I would be a lot more cautious. But Gil is hell bent on getting on the slopes, and so I've tried to guide him. Every time I speak to him on Zoom or whatever, on Messenger, my parting words are: take it easy, be careful. He's managed to get hold of a pair of sockets and some feet that bolt directly to the board. And so he showed me some film the other day. He took some film of, I can't remember which resort he was in the eastern side of the States, but he showed me some film, and he was doing exactly what I was doing back at Milton Keynes 17 years ago. He's got a massively rocket board, and he's spinning round and round in circles, basically. He's doing lots of 360s. But he's doing well. He's doing fine. He did call me after he rode and showed me the video, and he said he was absolutely knackered. He was very, very tired, and it was aching all over his body. And I did warn him that would be the case. So listening to Gil, it reminds me of me. But I had no one to ring apart from Dale, who's a non-snowboarder. I had nobody to ring, nobody to talk to and ask about things. Luckily, Gil he can ring me. So that's what we're doing. So Gil's busy over there using a different set of bindings, a different setup to me. And I'm wishing him all the best with that. But as soon as I can going back to the bindings we just talked about, as soon as I get that suspended binding set designed and built, we can hopefully start producing them and letting people have a go at them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I can see it being such a good idea to like mass produce. Do you have any other partnerships? Are you going to try and pitch them to certain kind of companies and charities?
Depending on how we go with Airbus CFMS Airbus and the aviation industry, I did make a contact when I was in Meribel. Whenever we were riding again, back then, back in the black and white days. I did make a contact there, and the guy who was linked to McLaren and Formula One, and he was really keen to tell me that they would be happy to help in any way they can. And as we all know, Formula One is space age technology, isn't it? It is. I mean, those things would fly, wouldn't they? If you didn't have the fairings on them, literally. So that might be a route that we go down. There's a guy there, Stuart, and I'll give him a ring when we find out exactly how we might not be going or going with Airbus, perhaps, or the aviation industry. So maybe the Formula One industry, because it is an industry. Maybe they'll come up with the answer. I don't know. I think we'd probably be looking at compounds, carbon fibers, that kind of thing. But let's see how we go with that. So there are other irons in other fires, but we'd like to see one sort of avenue explored to the nth degree first, perhaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. You kind of want to see the end goal more than anything, and it's clearly going in the right direction. Of course, unfortunately, COVID's really like screwed that up.
Well, funding is the biggest thing for anyone in doing anything like this. Funding is always a problem. And Dan and I have done it on a budget for 17 years. We've done it on a budget. I did have a GoFundMe page that helped out with the Paralympic thing. And some of that helped with the bindings, ensuring that I had bindings that were able to be, spares and stuff like that. But so we are in the process of working on redoing a website and having another GoFundMe page.
Yeah, good idea.
It'll be specifically for, we haven't got this set up just yet, but it'll be specifically for funding the bindings and future generations of the bindings.
Yeah, I think that's gonna like hit off so much. How have you found it? Like, have you, of course, going to Breckenridge and a bit more internationally, have you found the response to those kind of equipment out in international than just to kind of stand in Europe?
Yeah, all positive, and in Europe. Certainly in the States, whenever I'm in the States, be it Breckenridge or Stowe or wherever it is I'm riding in the States or Canada, I'm welcome with open arms, and people just want to stop, take photographs. They want to have a look and see. And there's always a bunch of people with engineering minds and they go, "Oh, dude, you want to do this? You want to do that? Why don't you try doing this?" And I'm constantly saying, "We did that, it broke, and we tried that, it broke." So but it's absolutely fantastic. The response we've had is fantastic, and I might add, actually, Max, that the Paralympic movement, that the people in charge of the snowboarding at Paralympic level, the IPC representatives, they were absolutely fully behind me. They wrote letters of recommendation. That they absolutely backed me 100%. They really wanted to see me and others with double above knee amputations at the Paralympics. And so I've got lots and lots of support from that quarter as well, from the race side, perhaps the competition side. But in snowboarding in general, the support I get wherever I go has just been enormous. It's actually, it's almost emotional. I've had some of the top snowboarders, the guys we all watch on films and stuff. I've had them sort of, breaking down emotionally in a bar in Breckenridge, because they've followed me down a mountain one day, and they just think it's awesome. Well, you know, dude, man, you're so awesome, man. I love it. You know, and it's great to have that support as well. They're all fantastic. Even places like New Zealand. I rode in New Zealand when I was Paralympic training and competing, and in New Zealand there was lots of support there as well from the Aussies and the Kiwis. It really is. It's worldwide. Absolutely fantastic support. And I can't wait to get the new bindings out there and be able to say to the world, look, here we are. If you have a double above knee amputee with no spinal or pelvic issues, these are the bindings that they can use safely to learn to snowboard again or for the first time.
I kind of want to go into the overall kind of future of adaptive itself, and in your kind of specific opinion, where you kind of see it going, in not just in terms of equipment, but in terms of the community, the growth of it, and kind of like the differences it was now to how it was like 5-10 years ago, essentially.
Oh, right, okay. So 10 years ago, or when I first started, let's go 16 years ago. There was nothing. There was nothing really. Very little out there. It was all ski orientated. Everything was about skiing. And really, someone like myself, umpteen people said to me, "Oh, you want to forget about snowboarding, dude? Just sit ski. Just sit ski." And constantly, I was saying to them, "Look, I sit ski for 10 years. I'm bored with it. It's boring. I don't want to do it anymore." And so, you know, back then there was nothing. It was, you were just pointed in one direction, and that was it. Since then, I've watched the sport of snowboarding grow, and I've watched the adaptive side grow. And every time, and I'm loath to always say this, and it sounds like I'm some sort of American freak, but in the States and Canada, they really do push it forward. They do in Europe as well. There is some stuff going on in Europe and Australia and New Zealand as well. But in the States, they really do push it forward. And only this season, I've been with talking with Gil, like I said, and with other people. I was on a Move United site. Move United is an adaptive platform, really, and there's a number of courses and seminars that they've run that I've been part of, and they really are pushing it forward. Anything new, innovative equipment is there, but also training, instructional and coaching processes as well. And they really are, even with the COVID thing, they're talking about how you do non-tactile training and coaching. And they had a whole session on that, you know, just on that. How do you do that? How are you going to teach someone with a disability who is going to fall over, as an able-bodied person does when they first learn snowboarding, but an able-bodied person can just get themselves back up again. A person with disability, someone like Ellie, for instance, they're going to need someone to be tactile, to grab them and help them back up again. And that is a challenge. That's a massive challenge. And the Americans and the Canadians are up front, and they're saying, right, we will take on that challenge. We're going to look at that and find out how we can do it. So they're already pulling in members of the family, the bubble, and they're getting them and they're teaching them to snowboard. And those people are out on the slope with them. So you're not teaching one person, you might have 3 or 4. So there's stuff going on there. The States has always been, for me, the place where I've got the most positive response towards snowboarding and the bindings, etc. And so there's a soft place in my heart for the States, really. Breckenridge in particular, because it's a place I go to. I've been for the last 12, 13 years to the Hartford Ski Spec. For the listeners, if you want to Google that, you can check it out. It's absolutely fantastic. There's some 400 or 500 people there with disabilities, and instructors and coaches from all over the planet, or all over the States, I should say, and Canada, flock there to give their time and knowledge for free. It really is an outstanding program and event that runs for about 10 days. There's other things. On the back of the Hartford one, the Move United, I wrote down some websites and stuff here that I could give at the end, perhaps. They Move United, they used the Hartford ski spec, which was all online, obviously. They moved into online sessions, like as I said, and seminars. And I joined a couple of them, and they were really good, very useful. I touched base with some old friends as well, but it was really good to hear what they were doing and the way they were progressing. Obviously, we're not known in this country for our snowy mountains, apart from Scotland earlier. It's all about the Alps for us. And in the Alps, I think I've got to be fair to them, that there is progression in the Alps. There are people doing things. The French are quite good. The Austrians, disability out there is getting more and more accepted. More people are becoming aware of it, certainly more so than a few years back. I'll give you a horror story if you like. Some 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I went out on a ski bob trip. For those that don't know, ski bob is a bike with, instead of wheels, you've got skis, yeah? So we went out on this trip with Blesma, and we got there. It was the second year that they ran this trip, and we went to it's just slipped my mind now, one of the Austrian resorts anyway. And we went up, and there was about 10 of us one day. We've all got limbs missing, right, by our very nature, Blesma, British Limbless Exercise Association. And so we're all crutches, wheelchairs, everything. And we've turned up at this lift, the ski lift, and the guys, the Austrian guys, came out, and they were like, "Where you go?" We were like, "No, we're going on the lift." No. We said, "Well, can you stop the lift for us?" "No, we cannot stop the lift." And the two people that were leading the party, they came forward with these rucksacks, and in they had 200 cigarettes and a bottle of scotch in each one. And they presented the pisties, the lift operators, with these. And they said, "Okay, we will slow the lift down, but if you don't get on, you don't go up the mountain." And that was the state of things in Austria, Switzerland, probably parts of France, if not all of France. That's the way it was. You know, if you couldn't do anything the way able-bodied people do it, you don't go up the mountain. Massively different now, and I must add, that was a terrible slag off for the Austrians. Actually, Austria now is one of the best places for someone with a disability to go. Still work to be done on accommodations and the infrastructure in that sense, but on the slopes, all of their pieces, all the people that work on the slopes, the mountain people, they are great, and I've not had any dramas with any of them. They are fantastic. Almost to a point where they're overly helpful. They really are fantastic. So complete turnaround for the Austrians, and I might add for the Swiss and the French have been pretty good as well. So massively different in that respect. As far as ski schools or snowboard schools and adaptive courses, programs, not being too aware of them, not being made very aware of them. I have looked around, can't see, nothing springs out. If any of your listeners, if you want to go on to, let me just check, I want to get it wrong, usadaptive.net /resources. Have a look at how many chapters, they call them chapters, how many chapters and programs are running in the States for adaptive skiing and snowboarding. It's enormous. You will not find that in Europe yet. The Move United one is moveunited.org. You'll get all the information you need there. Very interesting. They're still continuing to run stuff, I believe. There's people in the States like there's a guy called Kep Keop, a very good friend of mine, and Reggie Showers, he's double below knee amputee. Those guys are pushing it forward. They're pushing adaptive snowboarding forward, and I mean specifically snowboarding. They are pushing it forward, and they have the belief that they don't. And that's the same way as me. I don't care if you're a head on a wheelchair. You can snowboard. There's a way we can get you snowboarding. It takes some time, and you'll have to prepare for a challenge, but you can do it. And I say that jokingly and tongue in cheek, obviously, but those two guys are very much like that, and others as well, not just those two guys and others. They refuse to believe that that you can't snowboard because of a disability, which is great.
Yeah, it's so good to see just how it's all going. Could you actually give me some like examples that you kind of did talk about previously. You had some like kind of sessions online where people kind of bounce around ideas. Is there any chance you can kind of go into detail or any examples that you might have remembered from those sessions and Q&As?
Well, there was one. I did talk. There was one seminar that was almost became completely given over to non-tactile coaching and instruction. There was that one, but there was one on different methods of using the hoops. A hula hoop. One girl said she just grabbed a very simple. You get it from a kid's store, a hula hoop, and you can use that to help people, help your student. There was lots of the seminars. I didn't join all of them. A lot of them were ski based, so of course I didn't bother. but now the snowboard ones, there was 3 or 4 of them, and they were being led by people very intelligent people from a snowboard instruction perspective, and it was very good. And it was more. I was expecting quite a straight laced seminar or chat, but it wasn't. It was quite a chatty thing. It was about anyone who had any thoughts or advice, then put it in. We talked a lot about hearing and sight impairment as well, and the use of microphones and different types of microphones and speaker systems. It was quite a. It was really obvious. I'm really going back to what I was saying earlier. It was really obvious that they put a lot of thought into this, and they really didn't want to drop the ball or let COVID put a stop to any progress that might be being made within adaptive snowboarding, stroke skiing. So, I don't know. Without replaying some of them for you, I didn't record them anyway, but without replaying them, I can't remember some of the other ins and outs of it. But it was there was a cost involvement to that. If you were thinking from the point of view, should we do this as Brits? There was a cost involvement. I think it's $20 a go, $20 a session, which was, it didn't break the bank. It's not going to break anyone's bank, but there was a cost involvement there. The links to some of those links I just gave you there, if you look at linking to some of the programs, they probably list some of the methods. And I think you probably know as well as anyone, Max, the Americans love to do a video. And there's a lot of the instructors doing videos of how they do this particular thing, how they do that, and promoting what their little gadget or their adaptive equipment does. So that was quite good. There was one girl, she'd worked out a way of making. Do you know what? Off the screen, amputee pipe, the blue water pipe we use.
Yeah, roughly.
Right. So there's this blue pipe, this water pipe in this country, and she got hold of 2 lengths of that and managed to make extensions basically to her arms and to her student. And she was using that it's got handles, and she made a H out of one of them, so that person could crawl up and down this thing as she was moving. So really just an adaptation of the hoop or the rugby ball one. So that was quite interesting. She made that herself. She went down to Home Depot and bought some pipe and just chopped it up herself, put some tape around it. She colour-coded it as well for those that were visually impaired. So she colour-coded it as well. She made it tactile, so that someone who was profoundly or blind, completely blind, they would be able to feel where they are on this pipe. It was really quite good. So people using ingenuity, really using their brains and thinking, how can I get around this problem? And they've done it. They've got around COVID like that. And that's why they're out there teaching now. They've got the snow, obviously, but that's how they're out there teaching now.
So good to see. Yeah, I kind of want to move into the technical abilities of how you ride specifically, and what you found out differently. I mean, we kind of talked about this on the course itself, but what you found differently in terms of how you turn a snowboard to how I turn a snowboard, for example, and what you if you I know you're not. Well, sorry, carry on.
Sorry, say again, Max.
Sorry, carry on. No, it's all good. Go for it.
No, I think for me, right from the get-go, and obviously I've said it a number of times, and you're all aware that I've got no knees. So I can't crouch, I can't lean forward the same way you do. So all I've done over the years is watch people like yourself, Max, watch other snowboarders. What are you doing? How do you do that? So you're bending there, you're doing that. How can I replicate that interaction with the board without doing that movement? So I'll often put my elbow out on my shoulder because it's quite a large weight there. So I can use that to pressure the front of the board or the tail of the board, toe and heel. So I'll do that. With the finer points of edge work, I've looked over the years at what I'm doing with the bindings and where I wedge the bindings in much the same way you guys might put a wedge under the toe or the heel. I've done that in what would be your ankle, I suppose, the top of the binding. So I'll push myself forward and backwards slightly, depending on the condition, depending on what it is I'm trying to do. And the rest really was about, as I said before, watching another rider and saying, right, he or she is doing that. How can I activate my board the same way without those body parts, and just adapting that? And I think, Lee will tell you he's got slightly different techniques to me. He will do something slightly different because he's a slightly different body shape to me. And he's slightly shorter, very slightly shorter as well. So I've watched Lee, and I've taught him the rudiments, the basics, and how I did it, how I do it. And then he's watched me do it and thought, right, well, I can't do that quite the way Swifty does, so I'm going to do this. And so I'm now watching him and learning from him. So in answer to one of your questions that Mike, I don't know if we've got to it yet, but something from an adaptive snowboard coach's perspective, what some of the attributes you might need is be flexible, listen and watch what's going on. And the book's great, and Renell taught us the way to do things, but be flexible. I think Renell did say to us, be flexible, think about what you're doing, and think about how you might adapt that technique or that instruction to fit that particular individual, because that disability is that individual's disability. No two disabilities are the same. And Lee and I are both double above knee amputees, but we're completely different body shapes. We think differently. We are different. So you have to adapt to that.
Actually give us an example on what you found differently in terms of just kind of going in the nitty gritty kind of stuff, what you kind of learned from Lee, and how he turned a snowboard, then how you did it in really.
Well, for instance, a simple turn. I started out being quite aggressive with my lead arm. So I would lean back and put my elbow almost back to where my shoulder blade is, really, to initiate a turn. That's how I started out. And then as I improved, as my boards improved, I got better boards. And as I got more confident, I realized that movement didn't need to be quite as aggressive. Lee, for instance, I will still say to him a couple of years down the line, I will still say to Lee, go forward a bit more with that elbow or that fist or your head. You need to move forward a bit more because he's that bit lower down, or his board's that little bit longer or shorter. He needs to adapt to that. So I'm teaching him to find his own adaptations, his own way of doing it. And that's really a trick is to allow people to be a little bit more inventive themselves. After all, it's them that's actually doing it. I'm saying that it's probably the same in able-bodied instruction as well. I don't know, but because everyone's different. But when it comes to a disability, it's quite important to allow people to do that, to explore that, and make those mistakes. And let's face it, we all did that. We all fell our first few runs. We all fall, and you learn because you fall, like riding a bike. I defy anyone on the planet to turn around and say, "Oh, I've ridden a bike all my life. I've never fallen off." That's rubbish.
Yeah, it's a load of bull.
You can't ride a bike unless you've fallen off, because you've got to know what it is to hurt yourself. So it's the same with snowboarding, isn't it?
I want to quickly just touch upon Ellie as well, and her riding style, and how you kind of see how she's progressing at the moment with that.
Yeah, well, bearing in mind that Ellie hasn't ridden since last year, because obviously, and quite rightly, as I said before, the Paralympic the team, the GB team, I said, no, you are not going snowboarding. Which is quite right, I understand it. But when she was riding, the last time we were at Hemel, she was ripping it along. And the thing about Ellie was the concentration on her face. She really wants this. She really wants to learn this. And when she achieves it, and we've all seen this of not just people with disabilities, but everybody, people, that beaming smile when it goes right, when they achieve that beaming smile, and that is everything, isn't it? Ellie surprised me in as much that, and I think James would probably say the same thing, is she's quite a relaxed person. She doesn't come across as someone who's fretting and worried. Yet this girl, if she falls forward, she's only got 2 stumps to stop herself from face planting. But she had this calmness about her, she's like, and you can see in her eyes, and James will tell you this, James Sterry, when he was instructing her, when we're telling her something, she's looking at you and she's absolutely absorbing every single word. And she does exactly, if you said jump in that fire, she would jump in the fire. She would do exactly what you say. So you do have to be aware of that and not say anything, too flippantly. But she's great. And that the one thing that struck me about her was her how relaxed she was. She's not that, when you're showing someone or teaching someone, you can feel that tension in their shoulders. You can see them hunched slightly and their heads sort of going down a bit because they're scared, they're worried. You never really got that with Ellie. She just does. She doesn't seem to have any fear. Hence going off a box on her first ever snowboard holiday. That's something you do have to bear in mind with Ellie, and she does do everything to the nth degree. So if you tell her to do a turn, she will do a turn. Come hell or high water, she's going to turn. And she just keeps getting up. She just keeps getting up. We did find, as you and I covered on the course with Renelle, we did find constantly bearing in mind you have to, and with Ellie I found it quite important to keep saying, are you getting too cold? Are you tired? And I know this from what we started today, me talking about how tired I got when I was training and how much energy I was using. That is really important with Ellie as well. And so I was constantly saying to her, probably to a point of annoyance, are you cold? Do you want to go inside for a brew? Do you need to warm up? And 9 times out of 10, she'd say, no, let's just carry on. But it does get to a point where you just have to say, no, I know you're cold now. I know you're tired. Let's go in for a brew. I want a brew. I want a brew. So that's where Ellie differed slightly with regards to her disability. It became apparent almost from the get-go that yes, she's missing the arms, and therefore we can't do quite what I did with Lee using the arm. I'm showing you here, like you can, using that weight adjustment of weight. So Ellie was using her shoulder. She's using the rest of her body. The pelvis, as we all know, the pelvis is quite important for us. For able-bodied people, it is, but for us, edge work is predominantly not initiated, but completed with the pelvis. You need to shift that pelvis forwards and backwards to get that turning. So because you haven't got the knees, your pelvis becomes your knees. So that's where Ellie was slightly different, perhaps. And I'm really, as I said before, I'm really looking forward to her getting back on snow again, and when she's finished with the swimming, and we can really see where it goes. And with her permission, I'd like to make some videos.
Oh, mate, I would love to see that. I would love to see all the little updates and videos.
Maybe you come down.
Yeah,
you come down and do the video work, and just film what we always film on our phones, because I need to show her what she's doing. But and her dad often films from the gallery. But it's I think it's important to document what she's doing, because she is the first. I was the first double above knee amputee to snowboard. She's the first quad amputee to snowboard, and that's that's I think that's quite an achievement. I really do. So yeah.
Let's finish off with the last question then. In your personal opinion, what makes a great snowboard instructor, Darren?
I said before about flexibility, the ability to listen. I'm not famous for that. As the listeners will testify, I tend to waffle on a bit. But no, having the ability to listen to someone, sometimes read between the lines, be flexible. Your book is your guide. It's not the Bible. So be prepared to adapt. By its very nature, what you're doing is adaptive. So adapt to the adaptive. And I think this is specific to snowboarding, not to slag off any skiers, but this is specific to snowboarding. Have fun. Have fun. If you're not smiling, if your student isn't smiling, you need to work something out. You need to do something to make them smile, because snowboarding is about fun. If you're not worried about smiling, put Lycra on and go and ski. If you want to have fun and be one of the cool kids, snowboard, because that's really what it's all about. It's always been about that since the very first day, since the Burton started. It's all about having fun. And, you know, I'm loath to say it now, because people are trying to move away from the image of the bad boys, the renegades, the trend buckers. You know what I mean? We're not that really anymore. It's becoming more mainstream. But that thinking, that fundamental thinking, I think is a good way of looking at it. Being people that buck the trend and go against the current almost. You know, that's what we do as snowboarders. We have fun. And we don't have to wear Lycra or spandex as they used to years ago. You know, we don't have to do that. We are the bad boys. That's tongue in cheek when I say that. And I think it should always be that way. And as an instructor or a coach, I think, you know, having that in the back of your mind helps you to relax and chill and pass some of that over to your student and get them to relax and chill and see it as fun. And if nothing else, it makes that, you know, when they do that first face plant.
Oh yeah.
hopefully they get up with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
Or at least you know, they get up and go, right, I'm going to do that again. Or not do that again. I'm going to stay on my feet this time. So yeah, I think they're the key things for being a snowboard instructor, but also most certainly an adaptive snowboard instructor. Some of the best instructors that I've worked with, James Sweet, people like him. There's lots of others. Kep Keop, they've all got this really laid back, chilled attitude, which comes across to you and you absorb, and you, nothing then is too scary or too fretful. You just think you believe in them. They're not worried, so you know, why should you be worried? You know, there's a ton of stories out there that will go against that, but no, definitely an instructor that exudes that confidence for one thing, and a relaxed attitude towards what you're doing. You know, if you see too many times the ski instructors, don't you, on the mountain? And I know I'm slagging the skiers off again. I'm sorry, but you see them on the mountain, and it's all very staid and this and that, and that's not what we're about. That's not what we do.
Yeah,
snowboarding is about having fun, and most importantly, anyone can snowboard. Anyone.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Before we kind of wrap everything up, Darren, definitely kind of where can we find you contact wise, companies that you want to kind of really promote, and just the future. And what
well, I mean, oh God, if I did all the companies that have helped me in the last 17 years, we'd
well, the
be
main ones then, mate. The main ones.
Sorry. Obviously, AFPST, which is the t-shirt I'm wearing. AFPST, Dupras Snowboards, Burton Snowboards and clothing. Big thumbs up to all of them. They've been so helpful over the years. Ashley Wiggins for the film. If you want to check out more of his stuff, Randall Films is where you go for that. But yeah, Blesma have been instrumental in getting me where I am now, really, with funding as well as just moral backing. And the Not Forgotten Association as well, they've been fantastic. So organisations like that. But I could go on. I really could go on forever. I mean, it's it's a long list. It's a long list. CFMS with the bindings and Airbus have been brilliant, and I hope we are able to continue once the aviation industry comes back to some form of normal, the new normal. But who knows what's out there? Who knows what other industry might be able to help us? If anyone out there knows of an industry that might be interested in us, please let me know. And if you want to get in touch, then either through Max here or you can get me on Swifty at darrenswift.co.uk.
And then you have a Facebook page as well?
I've got a Facebook page, but what do you use for that? I don't know how to do that. Is it just Facebook, Darren Swift Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, if you just type in Darren Swift, I know you've. Yeah, you'll just.
There's three. There's two of me. There's a race site, or what used to be a race site. I'm going to dump that at some point. There's my normal one, which is Swifty. And then there was another guy called Darren Swift who I've hooked up with, and he's an outdoor sports enthusiast, and I've just hooked up with him on LinkedIn as well. But he gets some emails from me, I think, and I get some for him. But you'll find me, guys. It's the one with the big nose.
That's like, love it. Great, thanks so much, buddy. That's great.